Good morning. My name is Wendy Kinchen. I am in the education department here at Lasers, and so I want to welcome you back. I am glad to see your faces. I also know that we have a lot of you online. So whether you're here for the first time or the 10th time, then some of you have heard some of this before, some of it may be new. This is where we're going to talk about forms, reporting, lasers processes. My goal is to help you do your jobs better, do your jobs more efficiently, and to do them easier. Less headaches and more, I got it right. So we've changed the presentation up a little bit this year, and hopefully we're going to cover some of those areas that really are going to help you and benefit you in your job. Also, I don't want this to feel like a lecture. This is more like a conversation. So questions, comments, concerns, if you have one question, someone else may also have the same exact question. So we're going to, this is what our morning will look like. We're going to go through this presentation. So it's a roadmap for today. We're going to start with some of the resources that are available to you. Then we're going to walk through employer self-service. Then we'll do membership and enrollment. Then we'll talk about contribution reporting, end of employment. We'll touch on the Social Security Fairness Act and some training and some resources. So raise your hand if you've ever had that one form that comes back and you're like, why can't I get it right? Is there that one form that anybody just can't seem? Okay, well, we're not ready to share yet. That's okay, we'll get there. But I did see heads shaking, so apparently there is. And hopefully we cover all of that for you today. So I do want to start with your Lasers Toolkit. These are the resources that we have available to you. Think of the Employer's Guide, the Member's Guide, and the Liaison Memorandums as the holy trinity of Lasers processes, right? This is where you're going to find the answers to 95% of your questions. Make sure you bookmark these, have these closed, make them available. They are going to be your number one go-to source. So if you have a question, check the guide. I often say if you check the Employer's Guide first and it is not in there, chances are that it's in the Member's Guide. And I know that as employers, we have the Employer's Guide, so we don't often think of referring to the Member's Guide because that's for your employees and for your members. However, there is information explained. It's the same information, but it's explained a little bit differently in each guide because of the audience. But if you don't find what you need in that Employer's Guide, definitely open that Member's Guide and look at it. Additionally, Liaison Memorandum. We have them archived all the way back to 2006. These exist to help you. These are errors or mistakes that we see reoccurring, other people have made. We've created them to help you not have to learn your own mistake, but to learn from someone else's. So take the time to bookmark where you can get those liaisons. Make sure that you are on our list to receive those liaisons. If you go to the website under members, you can make sure to enroll yourself to receive those liaisons. So we're going to talk about liaisons that will help you for these different subject matters. Again, we're going to cover some of those topics that trip us up the most, how to fix them and how to prevent them. Another really great tool that you have is employer self-service. Everyone in here has access to employer self-service. It's that system we love, hate, and love again in that order, right? Like, it's there. It is a great tool. It is a great resource. I know that some of my ISIS agencies or my LaGov agencies tend to sometimes overlook employer self-service. However, employer self-service can be your best friend. It's not just for reporting, but it's for checking eligibility, correcting errors, and keeping your agency contact up to date so that you can be in the loop on these liaisons. I will let you know that, again, it can be like your best friend. It's going to let you know when you've made an error, like the best friend who lets you know that you have spinach in your teeth. However, it's not going to stop you from making the error. That friend lets you know you have the spinach, but it doesn't keep you from smiling in the group photo, right? Employer self-service, just like that. It's going to flag the error. It's going to let you know that there is an error. However, it's not going to stop you from submitting. So if you're using employer self-service and it flags or lets you know that there's an error, stop right there and check it. Chances are it's 100% right. The other beauty of employer self-service, and I know again for my LeGov agencies who just enroll through ISIS, then it goes to Solaris, employer self-service is going to let you know about errors in real time. The minute you make the error, it is going to let you know. You make an enrollment error, you're going to get the report. It's going to be a pop-up. It is going to let you know right then that there's been an error made, and it's going to let you know what the error is so that you can correct it, versus making an enrollment error, submitting it into lasers, and finding out about it 2 months later, and having to go back 2 months worth of work and reporting and all of that to correct those errors. So employer self-service truly can be your best friend. It takes an extra minute, but an extra minute up front can save you hours, weeks of fixing errors later. So definitely use your employer self-service. They have the member maintenance. That's where you can update member information, their demographics, update enrollment. They also have enrollment. This is your first step for new hires. Go and enroll them. The other really big key section that they have here is employer inquiry. This is where you can go to check and see if any new hire has prior service. I can't tell you how important that is. We all have those new hires that have a little bit of past in one of the retirement systems, but they forget, right? They don't let you know. Employer self-service will let you know. It will help you know that they had that prior service to help you know that you are now going to enroll them in the correct plan. It's as easy as opening employer self-service, going into employer inquiry, and entering their social security number. That is all you have to do, just to determine, do they have any prior service credit in one of the systems. Then they obviously have employer reporting for your monthly reporting, and employer maintenance is where you can keep your contact information up to date, as well as option 1, reporting for rehired retirees. This is going to help you determine errors. The faster you fix them, the less you have to deal with later on in the end, right? Accuracy is key from day one. And speaking of accuracy, let's talk membership and enrollment. Membership and enrollment, accuracy from day one, right? You have a new hire. Are they eligible for membership in lasers? That's the number one key that you have to determine. You then have to decide, if they are eligible, which plan are they eligible to be enrolled into. So membership into lasers is mandatory for most employees, except for those excluded by law. If they are not specifically excluded by law and or have the option to elect out, they must be enrolled into lasers. When you enroll them, make sure you're enrolling them into that correct plan. So the very beginning, the new hire is where we set that foundation, right? And so you have the responsibility of determining the membership eligibility, the plan, and keeping detailed documentation of why you did what you did, why you enrolled them, and why you enrolled them in that plan, or why you didn't enroll them. You do have some accountability in the fact that if there is an enrollment error and it has to be corrected later, if it is an administrative error or there are contributions or money that becomes involved, then your agency is responsible for that financial liability. So you want to take care of that up front. And so these are some steps that you can put into place on your new hire onboarding that can be more of preventative steps. They can help you kind of reduce errors in the beginning. If you add these steps into your processes, it will definitely help you. So every new hire was where it begins. Every new employee, every time, complete this process fully. The first, every new hire, you are going to complete Form 0101. This form is your guide. Complete it. It does not have to be submitted to Lasers. However, it does have to be maintained in their personnel file. So that should be step number one with every new hire. You complete the Form 0101. Second, you go to employer self-service, you go to employer inquiry, you enter that social security number, verify, do they have any prior service credit? Then you are going to enroll them, and you want to enroll them correctly. So you're going to enroll them into the correct plan. And then the last step, documentation. You are going to document everything. All documents, all forms must be maintained in that personnel file at your office for that new hire. There are some forms that do have to be submitted to Lasers. So you'll keep all of the forms in the personnel file, and you will fax the applicable forms to Lasers. And this is for every new hire. And it's follow these steps, and it's going to help you to have a lot less errors in the beginning. And so I do want to say, when you're submitting that current documentation, that to definitely use the most up-to-date current form. Use the forms off of the website. I'm going to take it. Use the forms from the website. I know at one time that we would print the forms and stick them in a manila folder in our filing cabinet, and when we went to go fill out the form, we just pull it out of our manila folder. Well, we can't do that any longer. Those forms are on the website. You can complete the form on the website and then print it for signature, but use the most up-to-date and most current form. So these steps will create the necessary record and paper trail in case of a future audit, or if there are errors that are determined in the future and they have to be corrected. Again, this is your kind of covering yourself. When someone comes and says, why did you do this? You have the record, you have the documentation, because how many of us have had an employee come back to us and say, I never heard that, no one ever told me. I don't see hands, but I see heads, right? We've all heard it. And so this is where you can say, as a matter of fact, I did tell you, you signed this form right here. And that's the importance of having these forms completed. It seems like a little extra step, I know, because the registration form doesn't have to be submitted to Lasers, but it is your guide. So let's talk about the importance of that form, 0101 membership registration. The purpose is that it is your guide. It is a guide step by step through the enrollment process. It was created by Lasers, so you don't have to go and create your own process. Just pull out the form. You have to ensure that they complete the form in all of its entirety. You have the record to determine if the employee is eligible to opt out. This is where they're going to make that election on this form. And that's where you're going to have it in their record when they come back 5 years later and figure out they've been at Lasers, in a Lasers eligible position for 5 years, and they can collect retirement and they should have joined, and no one told them they could. Well, yes, you did, but they elected to not join, right? You have that. And that's where they're going to make that election on that Form 1-1. That's also where they're going to talk to you about prior service credit. I definitely want to encourage you to sit down with every new hire and complete that form together. When you're a new hire, you're getting form after form after form, document, information, right? It all becomes a blur. So take a minute, sit down with that employee one-on-one, and go through that form. It's almost like employer self-service, as you can find out information in real time, right? You can say, did you ever pay into another system? Are you sure? So it provides that interaction. You know that you've walked through all the steps for enrollment. You know that you've done your due diligence. You've sat down with that new hire, and you've tried to get all of the information that you need so that their Lasers enrollment and their Lasers life and retirement is going to be smooth and correct, and you don't have to make any corrections later. This is the form that tells the story. This is the form that keeps that record. So membership and enrollment is so very important. However, there are common errors that we see quite often. And so I just put together a quick list of some of the most common errors that we see and kind of determining how you can correct those errors. One of the biggest errors is an incorrect hire date. This is where just double checking, taking your time really comes in to account. A lot of times these mistakes, while they seem simple, they're easy to make, and it's because maybe we clicked on something too fast. Maybe we meant to go back and fix something. Maybe it was Monday and you just hadn't had your coffee yet, right? For whatever reason, these mistakes happen, but there are ways that we can correct them and prevent them. So these are some of the most common that we see. Again, that incorrect hire date, the wrong Social Security number, and that could be something as simple as numbers are transposed. If a Social Security number is entered incorrectly, that is one of the most difficult corrections to make where enrollments are concerned, because they require that Lasers get involved, you get involved, as well as we have to also involve the employee, because we have to get documentation, we have to correct the system, we have to enter the new process. So an incorrect Social Security number is a headache for everyone. So again, just double check that you haven't transposed those numbers. Maybe you've enrolled them into the wrong retirement plan. Maybe you enrolled them into the wrong system. Maybe you didn't enroll them at all, right? Those are all small little errors that we make, but for most of them, they can be easily correct. One thing is just be proactive instead of reactive. You don't want to have to go back and correct it later. You want to correct it in the beginning. Just be as thorough as you can. Complete the Form 1-1, membership registration in its entirety with that new employee. Prevent data entry mistakes before you actually hit that submit button, and know that you've done your due diligence to do your job the best, the most efficient, and the correct way that you can. And so complete the Form 0101 with every new hire. Additionally, check that employer self-service for prior service credit. Also, check for transposed numbers before you hit submit. Confirm that the enrollment dates are correct. Double check that all the personal information, the demographic information that you have entered is correct. It's just take a minute, go back, double check. Make sure that you haven't missed something, you haven't changed something, you didn't put something in the wrong section. Again, when we're hurrying, then these errors are happen. And I know that when we hurry, it's like we've seen this form before. We've had new hires, 5 last week. It becomes kind of monotonous, right? I filled this form out 1,000 times, so I'm just filling it out. Again, I know that you've seen it, you've enrolled. Just take your time and go through it thoroughly. So let's talk about some enrollment challenges. Let's see if any of you feel a little bit open now. Do any of you have any common enrollment challenges, errors that you see regularly at your agency, with your agency? Even online, we can. Okay. So, no errors. We're all doing enrollment perfect. Good for you. And like I said, I wanted this to be more of a conversation. We are here as a group. If there are common errors that you see that are being made at your agency. Chances are that another agency has made these errors too. And this is a great time to kind of share. We've saw these errors. This is what we've implemented. It has helped. It hasn't helped. This is that forum to reach out to each other just to kind of figure out that we just can't seem to grasp this. It just doesn't seem to be done right. So, again, if at any point anyone wants to share, please feel free to speak up. We do have liaison memorandum for enrollments. And so, again, these exist to help you benefit from someone else's mistake. They often clarify what's new, what's changed, what many of us have been getting wrong. They are created because these are errors that we see reoccurring, and we want to give you the steps. If there is a change, Tina just went over some legislative changes. When changes happen and there's a different steps or processes, we'll send these liaisons out. Again, they go all the way back to 2006 in the archive, and they all are titled. And so going all the way back to 2007, this is the liaisons that I could pick out that dealt with enrollment issues specifically. So if you want to use this slide as a guide, as a resource to just refer to when you have an enrollment question, hey, which liaison memo would that be? And then you can go onto the website. These are gold. They exist for you. Go highlight, bookmark, make it a favorite, right? So once we have the member enrolled, that's the first step. The second step is reporting, right? And so we want to get that right as well, because reporting can be a completely different headache if there are mistakes made. And so for my human resource and my payroll personnel, I really wanted to try to incorporate some topics or subject matter that concerns everyone, where we see most common errors that are affecting all personnel who deal with where lasers is concerned. And so I know that reporting is one of those areas. And so, this is everyone's favorite topic, but this is often where things kind of go off the rails. Reporting's like flossing. You don't like to do it, but if you don't, it hurts later, right? You have to, so you can always think of it as, okay, I don't love to do it, but let me do it and get it right now, and then it doesn't come back to haunt me later. And so this is one of the most critical steps that the agency has for their employees where lasers is concerned. And so you have to submit a certified report to us every month. They must be submitted by 15 days after the close of the prior month. Accuracy is extremely important, and small error in reporting causes a huge headache later on. The other is the contribution rate. Contribution rates change every July 1. We will send out a liaison memo letting you know before the July 1 date that the contributions rates have changed. It will give you those contribution rates. Those contribution rates must be used with the first July payroll. Even if those earnings, even if that compensation was earned and paid prior to July 1, if you are reporting it in July, it must be at the new rate. The contributions must use that new contribution rate, not the previous fiscal year contribution rate. So make sure you get that updated. Again, sign up for the liaisons to make sure you get them. If it's getting around May and you haven't seen that liaison come through with the new contribution rates, go on our website, check it, see, it would be on there posted. So you do have access to that information. If contributions are reported incorrectly based on those contribution rates, again, it's something that we have to definitely go back and correct. And so we're reporting their earnings and the contributions. And so it's the pay that really counts that we need reported to us. We need reported to us that earned compensation. And so that is the base pay, emoluments, permanent optional pay. Those are the compensation or wage types that are Lasers eligible and should definitely be reported to Lasers. There are other wage types and earnings that are not Lasers eligible and should not be reported or included in that base pay, and that would be non-recurring compensation. So I said base pay, emoluments, and emoluments typically include allowances for a car, a phone, clothing, housing allowances, things such as that. Those are considered emoluments that would be included. What would not be included are rewards, recognition, incentives, a reimbursement for a travel expense or something like that. I once heard someone say, if it's something you would brag about getting to your coworkers, then it's probably not Lasers eligible, right? If it's that little extra like, whoo, guess what I got? Then probably not eligible for Lasers reporting. And so just make sure that you know the difference. There are liaison memos that go into detail that talk about what is actually eligible, what is not eligible. And so you want to definitely just make sure you look at those memos. If you have a question, if it just doesn't seem right, if you don't know, contact Lasers. Contact Lasers. We will help you. We will let you know. And so the emolument amount must be included in the base pay and the contribution submitted on the what the earnings are, what the value of those emoluments are. So when you report, that's how you'll do it. And so leave without pay reporting. That is another one of those kind of, sometimes I get it right, sometimes I get it wrong. Tuesday I understand, Friday I don't, right? Because it's a different situation with every employee. So it's very important. This is, again, one of those little steps that small mistakes or big headaches later on. And so reporting leave without pay. This case, if you are an ISIS agency or a LaGov, I will tell you, you're off the hook. You do not have to manually report leave without pay. That is going to come through the transfer. The data, the information will come through on the transfer. So if you report through ISIS or LaGov, you do not have to manually report leave without pay to Lasers. For those of you that are not, if you're non-ISIS, you must manually report leave without pay through employer self-service. For every minute of leave without pay, it needs to be reported to us. We need you to report leave without pay, and you must include a reason for that leave, the reason that they took the leave. And so when you report leave, you're going to enter a start date, and you're going to enter an end date, and you're going to use an 8-hour rule, 8 hours in a day. And so you use the 8-hour rule with the start and the end date. If you have an employee who takes leave without pay for less than 8 hours, maybe they took 4 hours in the morning and they came in the afternoon, then that start date and that end date will be the same exact date. So if it is the start date and the end date is the same, if it is less than 8 hours. Additionally, if it is less than 8 hours for 2 weeks, they take off 4 hours every morning for the next 2 weeks. They take leave without pay. Well, the start date would be the first day that they took leave. The end date would be the last. You don't have to enter a start and end date for every day for those 2 weeks, even though it's under the 8 hours, because it was a consecutive event. You can just enter the start date as the beginning of the 2 weeks and the end date as the end of the 2 weeks. It's going to be reported in employer self-service, and there is a format. And so you can see this example. The employee took 2 hours on May 20th, and so that's less than 8. The begin date was May 20th. The end date was May 20th. Additionally, in the second example, they took 2 hours a day for almost the entire month of September, from September 5th to September the 30th. Start date is September 5th, end date is September the 30th. So you don't have to report every single day that they took 2 hours in September. If there is an error or if something doesn't seem right, Lasers will definitely contact you. Additionally, if there was leave without pay prior to Solaris that wasn't reported, then we will contact you to get that information. So we will at times have to contact you in regards to that leave without pay. So just like with membership and enrollment, with reporting, there are kind of those common errors that we see reoccurring, and some of those are the wrong contribution rate. So on that first July report, you forgot to update the contribution rate in your system. So for that first July report, every employee used the rates from the prior fiscal year, right? So that's one big error that we see. Omissions, just forgetting to enter leave without pay or forgetting to enter an employee's earnings, that is another error. Incorrect base pay. We see this a lot, especially with duly employed employees, the reporting of base pay. If the base pay is incorrect, it will cause errors in that retirement calculation. Leave without pay. Make sure that it is reported. Report it. Enter it the day that they take it, enter it the day they come back. Don't put it on your list I'll get to that later. If you just do it right then, set a reminder, then it's done, and you don't have to worry about it later. Ineligible wages being reported as eligible wages. That causes errors quite often. And drop reporting. Once an employee has entered drop, we do get earnings and contributions reported for that employee. When an employee enters drop, they no longer make contributions to Lasers. You no longer make contributions to Lasers. So when an employee enters drop, their very first drop entry date, there are going to be no report of earnings or contributions for the employee or for the agency. I know that we send a confirmation to the agency letting you know that we've gotten the drop application and that the drop entry date is X date. And I know that sometimes the agency will wait to get that letter to go ahead and stop the reporting. However, please don't wait for that letter, because there are times when the letter goes out after the drop entry date. And so if you're waiting on that letter and you receive it after the drop has started, then you've reported on earnings and contributions that they received during drop that are not to be reported, and you have to go back and correct it. So at whatever date an employee enters drop, that's the date you stop reporting earnings contributions for the employer and for the agency. Again, this is just another when we rush, when we're just kind of going really fast, when we're like, I've seen this screen 1,000 times, So again, just take the time. A question.
Yes, we have a question from one of our online attendees. Is there any report that can be run to see an employee's LWOP?
There is not.
Okay, thank you.
So the question was, is there a report to run employees' LWOP, to report like a record of their LWOP? No, there is not. Thank you for the question. So we saw some of the errors that happen that are common, but let's talk about what happens when an error occurs. And what's going to happen is if an error occurs, an exception is created in employer self-service. You will receive notification in employer self-service that the exception was created. You will also receive notification from Lasers that the error has been made, and you have to then go in and correct it. You have to go in and submit that report, that corrected report, through employer self-service. So that's another reason, employer self-service, it's going to show you and tell you the error, but it's not going to keep you from submitting. So if that error pops up, take notice, go back and double check. We do have a detailed list and explanation of the exceptions in Appendix A on the employer self-service website. And so go again and mark that if you are payroll personnel who does reporting and you're not familiar with the exceptions. If you just have quick access to that when you're notified by ESS, you can go and look up and see what that exception is telling you and create it before it's ever submitted to you. Go bookmark this, tattoo this on you, make sure you know where to find the appendix to understand what the errors are. It's important to stop errors before they happen, proactive versus reactive. I said it earlier. However, errors happen, they are made. Well, the fix to reporting errors is basically all dependent upon the timing that the error is realized. And so if there is a reporting error and it is realized within the 12 months of the error being made, the fix for that is going to be a retroactive payment. And so you'll have to submit a retroactive payment. You'll have to go in and you'll have to calculate what the contributions and the rate would have been for those months affected. You create a breakdown, a month-by-month breakdown. You submit that to Lasers with a lump sum payment, and we will go back and make those retroactive and fix the employee's record. If the error is caught after 12 months, if the error was made longer than 12 months ago and it is just being realized, the only way to fix that is through an administrative error. How many of us love to have to deal with an administrative error? None of us, right? So timing is everything. However, if you catch it late, if you catch it after that 12-month occurrence, it is going to have to be through the administrative error process. And so you're going to have to apply for the administrative error. You're going to have to submit the letter. You're going to have to submit the form with the breakdown of earnings. You're going to have to go back and calculate, again, the contributions. It's also going to include compounded interest. There may be an actuarial fee, and it may affect that employee's service credit. And so it's going to be a much larger headache. You're going to have to take a larger amount of time. You're going to have to go through Lasers. You're going to have to go through that process. And I can tell you that administrative errors, I think at one time, maybe they were like, oh, if I make a mistake, I'll just apply for an administrative error. That's no longer the case. Lasers is no longer treating administrative errors as a quick fix for a simple error, right? So you just want to be as diligent as you can. You want to catch those errors early. You want to fix those errors early. Do your future self a favor. Audit yourself regularly, right? Make sure that it is done correctly. And so let me tell you a little story about reporting. And so we have an agency that had a new hire. They did not enroll that new hire. Their earnings went unreported for 12 months. That had a huge impact on that employee. What it did was it caused that employee to lose service credit. It affected that employee's first eligible date for retirement. It affected the calculation of their benefit. It also affected their contributions because there were no contributions made for that 12 months. So now, are you going to ask the employee to go back and make those contributions? So even though it's the error that you made and you're going to have to correct it, it has a big impact on that employee. And sometimes you can get away without them finding out and fix it. But when they find out, they'll let you know, right? They're on you to know, when is it fixed? How is it going to be fixed? So it definitely impacts that employee. In this scenario, the only way to correct it was to apply for that administrative error. They had to submit the letter, the month-by-month earnings report. They had to pay the contributions. They also had to pay that compounded interest. So they had to take a lot of steps to do the correction. So self-audit, just regularly self-audit. Check to see if you have any missing contributions. Check to see if you overlooked one employee. Did you skip one line? Just take that self-audit, take that time. Make sure it's right up in the beginning. So, going to stop and check in now and see. Anybody want to share? Anybody have any common reporting errors or reporting errors that they're making and would like to know if anybody else is making them and if they have any fixes or processes they put in place to help them? Okay. Well, for reporting, we have also... Oh, yes, ma'am, I'm sorry.
So the person that's full-time can go down to part-time. We're the Gov agency. Do we need to let y'all know that, or will that automatically be noticed?
If they are full-time and they go to part-time, that needs
40 hours, they go down to 32 hours. So they're still technically considered full-time?
Does that need to be a new entry? So the question was, if you have a full-time employee go to part-time 32 hours and you are a LaGov agency, do you have to report that to Lasers? And the answer was no, that because it's in LaGov, Lasers will pick it up by the base pay that's being reported and the change in the contributions and earnings. Good question, thank you. Yes, ma'am.
Back to the contribution rates. And you say every year the employer contribution rates change. How do we know that, and where do we find that information at?
So July 1 is the effective, the new fiscal year. July 1 is the effective date of rate changes. Lasers sends out a liaison memo every year before July. And the end of April, May, they send out 2 memos to let you know exactly what the new rates are going to be. The liaisons are also on Lasers' website under the Employers tab. There is a tab that says Liaison Memorandums. If you click on that, it pulls up the most current liaisons. It also has archived liaisons that go all the way back to 2006. So if you wanted to go back and find out what was a rate in 2011, you can go to the archived liaisons and go to 2011 and see the liaison that reported, that we sent out prior to July 1 with the new rates. But you should definitely get at least 2 memorandum, and then if you don't, for whatever reason, it is on our website accessible to employees through the employer tab. So we do have the liaisons that go out and let you know about the rate changes. We also have the liaisons that talk about just some of the other common reporting errors that occur. Again, this is a great resource for you, even if it was distributed in 2011, it doesn't mean it's not still relevant to you. It might be the exact answer that you need or explanation that you need for whatever the process is that you're trying to do. And then I'm going to touch now on kind of end of employment for your members, for your employees. And I want to talk about retirement, the process. And so I know that when an employee kind of reaches the finish line, right, when they're close to that retirement, they're going to come to you and they're going to ask you, what should I do? Do I enter drop? Do I do IBO? Do I retire, not retire? They're going to want you to tell them. That is not your responsibility. That's where Lasers comes in. That is what we do. You don't want to tell your employee something and then 2 months later they find out that it was incorrect and now they're angry at you. Let them be angry at us. You are not responsible to tell them what to do in retirement. You do, however, have some responsibilities to help them through the retirement process. And so those responsibilities include providing the correct retirement application. If they're asking for IBO, give them IBO application. Don't give them the regular retirement application. Ensure that all dates are correct. Ensure, speaking of dates and that they're all correct, let's actually go back to a really big error that often happens, and that is termination date versus retirement date, and what a difference a day can make. And so the termination date is the last day that that employee is an active employee with your agency. That is the last day that earnings and contributions will be reported for that employee. The retirement date is the day after or the day that Lasers receives the retirement application, whichever is later. Termination date does not equal retirement date. Think of it as you cannot be an active employee and a retiree on the same day, right? You are either an active employee or you are a retiree. So termination date and retirement date are not the same. It is very critical that those dates are right. And so you need to make sure that when you talk to your employee about the day that they are wanting to terminate, that that is the date that's put on that application. Again, as long as Lasers receives that application prior to the termination date, then the effective date of retirement will be the day after termination date. Unless otherwise, there are some exceptions to every rule. If you have an employee that, terminated state employment 2 years ago and now they're of the age and the eligibility to retire, obviously the termination date and the date we receive the application are going to be, the application is received after the termination. They're essentially retiring as an inactive employee. So there is an exception to every rule, but the general rule is termination date, last day as an active employee, at the agency, retirement day after. And the possible consequences of a late application or of Lasers receiving that application after the termination date is that the employee could lose retirement eligibility. They could retire as an inactive member versus an inactive versus an active. They lose the benefit of leave. They might lose their benefits with Office of Group Benefits. It might affect the way their benefits calculated. So it has some real dire consequences on that employee's retirement if those dates are incorrect. And so just make sure that you get those dates correct on that application. Yes, ma'am.
Recently, had something like a small incident like this. One of our retirees got her retirement date confused, I guess with the drop date, something with that. And she actually was supposed to still be paying into Lasers, and the dates got confused some kind of way. So we got a notification from you all saying, well, what was the actual, date of drop, basically. And so she missed 2 weeks of paying into Lasers. So how is that corrected, on your side? Because we had to report the actual, drop date. It was the 5th, but she had it towards the end of the month, which was the 25th. And I guess we got the notification from you all saying that, hey, something is wrong here.
So you didn't pay 2 weeks of
Yes,
pay that she should have paid?
Yes.
Okay, so you'll just need to add that to the next report. What agency are you?
We're LDR.
Okay, so that's going to be, you're going to have to go through OSUP and let them know. And they'll probably get you to change a date somewhere. I'm not familiar with how all the system works, but they'll get you to change a date somewhere, and it'll retroactively take those contributions out of the next check that she receives, and it'll get reported to us on the file that
Okay.
gets sent.
Well, because we have a lot of times, we have employees, they don't understand that the termination date and the retirement date are not the same. So they'll think that both are the same. We're like, no, it's not the same. So I was just saying.
I have a question.
And it was caught quick, so it's an easy fix, right? Another question, Lauren.
I have a question. So if I have an employee that's, their mind is set on retiring in December, they've come, they've gotten their paperwork they need from us, they've made an appointment with you all, but how soon, if they're retired, they want their retirement date to be in December, how soon should Lasers get the paperwork so they can start processing? Because what's the turnaround, like 60 days for you all?
So that's a great question. The question is, how far in advance of a retirement date does Lasers receive the applications, the documentation, the forms? You can submit that information up to 6 months in advance. Well, let me say this. Any kind of documentation such as Social Security cards, birth certificates, marriage license, judgments of divorce, those can be submitted to Lasers at any time. Once they're in an employee's file, it's one less thing they have to worry about at retirement. But as far as the retirement applications and the applicable forms, those can be submitted to Lasers up to 6 months prior to that termination date and at any point in between.
We have a question online.
Yes, ma'am?
Can the new hire upload the birth certificates and social security cards into My Lasers and their designation of beneficiary?
They can upload the birth certificates and the social security cards. The designation of beneficiary is an e-form that so they wouldn't upload the designation of beneficiary, but it's a form they could sign or process and submit through their My Lasers. Do y'all find that you'll have a lot of employees using their My Lasers? No? Yeah, we'll work on that'll be our next project.
Show them how to sign up. Sorry, to sign up for My Laser. So we do give them that, and then when they come and speak with us when they're ready to retire, we also give them the sheet if they haven't already done it. So we do try to ensure that they know about it and that they've been on it at least once, and that they can get a lot of answer. They can do like the self benefit.
Right, the calculation.
Yes.
Right. Awesome, thank you. Well, there you go. See, we've come a long way since 9:30. So these are some of the other responsibilities, again, that you have. Ensure that application is complete, that the termination date is correct. Another mistake that is often we encounter is the submission of the Form 0701 certification of unused leave. This is something that you, as the agency, have a responsibility to take care of that is not initiated by the employee, right? The employee will initiate that they want to go through the retirement process. This is part of that process that is not initiated by the employee, but a very important responsibility that you have as the agency. And so just make sure that you do submit that Form 0701. And let's talk about that form in a little bit of detail and the importance of that form. And so, again, this is where small mistakes can really make huge headaches. Well, these are the common errors that are made with those applications. Late submissions, submitted before that termination date. You gave the wrong application type. The dates don't match. The drop entry, you had issues on the date of the drop entry. So those are just some of the things to just be aware of and check out for to keep errors from occurring. And now we're going to talk about that Form 0701, Certification of Unused Sick and Annual Leave. After the final paycheck, that form is due to Lasers after that employee receives their final paycheck or within 30 days of effective date of termination. It is extremely important that Lasers gets that form. We will not process a benefit for that employee without that form. It is important that it is completed accurately. Leave is going to be submitted to us in days, so you'll put the hours. You're going to use decimal places. You're going to divide by 8 hours, representing 8 hours in a day, work day. Then you're going to, and that converts into days. Again, put the decimal places. Do not round. You are going to submit this form to us whether a employee has a leave balance or not, and the dates must be consistent. So the retirement date has a termination date. The certification of unused leave, it also has a termination date. Those dates must match exactly. If those dates don't match exactly, there is an error. It is very important that those dates be the exact same date. Again, don't put the termination date on the retirement application and then the retirement date as the date on the unused leave certification. The termination dates must match exactly, and it is checked for every certification that we get. And a lot of times there are errors made on these forms that, again, are just a little bit of attention to detail that can keep them from happening. The form asks you to include leave without pay dates. Make sure that you enter that. Mismatched termination dates. If those term dates don't match exactly the certification and the application, that is a huge error. If it's missing the agency certification, agency personnel should initial and certify all forms. If there's incorrect leave reporting, you've rounded or you haven't taken out the 300 hours that the agency paid, you included those hours, make sure that the leave that is reported is correct and that you submit it. Failure to submit is just one of those things. You set it on the end of your desk and you say, I'll fax it over later this afternoon, and life happens and it gets overlooked, right? So prevention is easier than correction. Again, so in 2004, we issued Liaison Memorandum 2402 and 2408. These liaisons are the same exact, but the error was happening so often and reoccurring that we saw it necessary to submit the same liaison memo as a reminder 2 times within that 1 year. So definitely just take the time to make the corrections, look at the liaisons, get the processes right, submit things before the deadline, verify, enter the correct dates. Just simple little steps and processes. And so one last example before I wrap up is we did have an agency submit an application with an August 1 termination date. That certification of leave had an August 2 termination date. That's a day separate. That means that there was a separation between the dates, right? And so then what happened was this member had to have this corrected. It had to be done through an administrative error. The only way to fix errors on a retirement application that are caught after the termination date is through an administrative error. And so again, this employee, it all got fixed in the end, but their leave, they lost the ability to receive that extra benefit of leave. Were issues with their Office of Group Benefits benefits. The calculation was a little bit different, and their service credit was a little bit different. In this situation, the employee didn't lose retirement eligibility altogether, but very well could have become completely ineligible for retirement at all. So again, this is where it affects your employee much more than you realize. It had to be fixed through an administrative error that had to be submitted. Lasers had to go through and approve. And so, again, the moral, check, double check, triple check, take your time, go back and just look through and make everything is correct. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, we have 2 questions online. The first is, our agency works 7-hour days. How do we note this on the leave form?
You see, right? We still use an 8-hour day. If they use a 7-hour day on the leave, do they still use 8 hours?
They can denote it on the form itself. But we do have some historical documentation for agencies that do traditionally have a 7-hour normal workday. But yeah, I would denote it on the form itself.
Certification?
Yeah.
Okay. So if you do not use an 8-hour day regularly, then denote that on the leave certification when you submit it to us.
Okay. What if we certify unused leave on a non-retiring employee and they didn't tell us they were transferring to another agency or join another agency a few months later?
Great question, and that reminded me that I overlooked that process. So I talked about the certification of unused leave for those members or employees who are actually retiring. I did want to touch base on that form if you have employees that are terminating but not retiring. And so if you have an employee that is terminating employment and they have at least 5 years of service credit and they're just terminating, then it might be in the best interest of you and that employee for you to go ahead and submit the certification to us. And that is because if they return back to state employment at a later date and that leave needs to be included in their benefit later on, then if we have that certification when they leave, we don't have to come back to you 10 years later and ask for you to supply that information to us. It is not mandatory that it be submitted for non-retiring employees who terminate with 5 or more years, but it's a good habit to get into. If you have an employee that is terminating and they are transferring to another Lasers eligible agency or position, we do not need the form. If you submitted it, it's of no consequence. It's not going to affect them in any way. Or if you have an employee that's terminating and telling you that they are going to refund, then in that situation, it's probably not necessary that you submit it. But best practices, if you have an employee just terminating, but not retiring, not refunding, go ahead and submit the form to us. Okay, and so I'm going to just wrap up. Any other questions, comments, concerns? We do have the liaisons for the retirement dates, the termination date, the filling out the application, where the forms matter. Again, we have liaisons for almost all situations, so go and check that out. And then I'm going to wrap up. I do want to touch on Social Security really quickly. So there is the form SSA 1945. This must be provided to every employee for their signature and held in their file. At one time, there were 2 laws that would affect a individual who was getting a pension from Lasers and was also eligible to get a Social Security benefit. That was the windfall elimination provision and the government pension offset. January 5 of 2005, the Social Security Fairness Act was approved by legislation. This repeals both of those laws. You still have to have the employee sign that form. We've not received any instruction from Social Security otherwise. However, those laws are repealed. Therefore, a person who retires and is getting a benefit from Lasers is eligible to get Social Security, and that Social Security is no longer affected. So it will not be reduced or eliminated. They would get their Social Security benefit as well as their Lasers benefit. And then lastly, I just want to talk about the key takeaways. If you take away nothing else, be proactive, verify prior service credit, double check all dates, use the current contribution rate, use the current forms, submit those to us on time, and confirm that Lasers has received the information, especially if it's close, if you're cutting the dates close. Just call and verify, hey, Lasers, do you have that information? We will let you know. And then lastly, I do want to let you know about resources, education, training. The education department does offer seminars, training. We do offer agency training. It is virtual. We also have in-person training. We will come to your agency. We will create a presentation or specific to your agency and maybe some of the issues that you're experiencing. Also, we have the CPTP course. I know that that is mandatory for new hires in the HR and the payroll positions, and I find that once they take it early, you never take it again, but you don't have to be a brand new hire in one of those positions to take the CPTP. We offer it. It's 4 hours, once a quarter. You can register for it at Leo. You can take a refresher at any point. Also, we are thinking about or would like to implement some kind of maybe quarterly, like let's just touch base with HR and payroll personnel to see if there are errors or just to kind of maybe go over processes. So when you complete your survey at the end of the presentation, if you want to just maybe include like, hey, I would be interested in attending something like that virtually, you know, a 30-minute let's get together. Let us know what topics or if you'd be interested or how you would want to see that happen. Definitely you reach out to the education department and we would be happy to get you any of the education and training that will help you. With that, I think I've overstayed my welcome. Any questions, comments? Yes, ma'am.
With our forms, I know that they have to have a wet signature. Will lasers ever allow for digitally signed documents?
So that is the goal one day. However, not all forms are eligible, but we will accept faxed copies of any of the forms except for legal forms. So you only have to fax those documents to us. You don't have to mail them to us. You don't have to hand deliver them to us. We must just receive them one way or another, and by fax is okay. If it is a legal document, such as a judgment of divorce, a power of attorney, a spousal consent, those must be the original because it has the wet signatures and the seals. So any document other than a legal, fax, mail, hand deliver, as long as we get it, you fax it, you verify that we did receive it, and it's in the file. Did that answer the question? No. So as of right now, you cannot, not all forms are available digitally to be submitted. The goal is to do that. So in the interim, we will accept faxed forms. Not every form has to still continue to be mailed or hand delivered. Sorry. Yes, ma'am.
My agency and several of our districts have been having fax issues where our fax machine stops working. Is there any way that y'all will establish an email address for us to email these forms to you? Because for some of my districts, I'm having to fax for them eventually.
Again, I think the goal is to get there. There are some real security issues with that right now, emailing forms. We don't have, at the moment, a way to make sure that they are definitely secure, and so we don't want to put any form, any person, any member in a position that their information could be compromised. So we can't accept email right now. But again, I think the goal is that we are headed, our goal is to go in that direction. And we will let you know as soon as. All right, thank y'all so very much.